Okay, yeah, the session is on recording. So guys, here we were, I explained to you task 25. What you're supposed to do, you have to analyze this syllabus, okay? The lessons that are arranged in terms of difficulty level, right? So you need to tell us what are the assumptions about language learning and about the language itself, okay? But the most commonest of the exam assumptions behind any of the grammatical syllabuses, I have already told you that according to Chomsky also, every language consists of finite set of rules, a finite set of grammatical items which can occur in different combinations for different purposes and for different meaning making. Okay. So when we talk about finite rules and finite items in grammar of any language, that means those can be learned also, right? And I told you that is the reason when we are taught grammar, especially in our system, we start learning English as a second language through its grammar, and we learn the rules. We learn the rules and then practice it through the exercises. We try to apply those rules. Okay. So one of the assumptions you will find here also, and you can put that in discussion in your task as well, that grammatical syllabuses are basically graded. Sometimes from simple to complex structures, and sometimes what the syllabus designer feels would be easier structures and moving to the difficult ones. But I told you that there is no one-to-one relationship between simple and difficult, and simple and complex, and easy and difficult, right? Sometimes complex structures can be easy to learn, and sometimes, you know, difficult, simple structures are difficult to learn. Okay. If I give you an example, you must have seen people are not really good at using the rule of ES. Okay. She does her work. We do our work. Okay. Do and does. At many of the places, even, you must have seen people who might be very fluent in English, they would commit such mistakes. She don't do it. Okay. Or he do that, right? And does is, you would see people rarely using this does. Also, she comes to the university. They come to the university. So many times you would see that people using she come to the university, not adding an S, and not feeling that it is a mistake, because it is such a mistake that it does not affect the meaning of the sentence. The meaning is anyway conveyed. She comes to the university and she come to the university. So seemingly this adding of S is very simple. Okay, that's a very simple structure that people might be learning or might be asked to learn. But what happens actually is that they keep on making errors about this ES and S structures. Okay, singular and plural subjects would change the form of the verb, right? This is called a subject-verb agreement, right? So at even higher levels, you would see that people commit mistakes in subject-verb agreement, which seemingly is a very simple structure. So I'm just giving you an example that, simpler structure can be difficult to learn, and difficult structure might be simple to learn. Okay, so okay, Mazib. Okay, now that we have a lot of time, we can do that. Okay, no problem. We can even discuss it while you are on campus. We can do that. Okay, so basically you have to deal with the assumptions. What are the assumptions? Okay, so the general kind of assumptions are these. Okay, assumptions are also made about the language transfer, right? And we assume that if the learner has internalized the formal aspects of given piece of language, they will automatically be able to use it outside the classrooms, which we experienced while we were witnessing English being taught through grammar translation method or through other methods, that students were not successful in communication. Okay, we assume that when they would learn the rules of grammar, then when they would practice a certain structures, so this would lead them to use the language communicatively, which isn't the case as we have seen. Okay, and this is just not what we read, what we have read in the book or what we keep on reading around, but this is our personal experiences also. Even after, maybe 14 years of uh, learning the language or using the language or reading from the English book or keeping, um, keeping keep practicing writing in English, our students are not able to speak fluently in English. Okay, that's a common experience around. Okay, um, students who have graduated, who have studied for 14 years, of course, the medium of instructions and the medium of education in Pakistan is English. But the problem that we face as teachers also, that the students are unable to become fluent in English, and this is the reason, this stays as an assumption that if you make the students learn the rules, they will be able to gain communicative competence as well. Okay, so another difficulty that is indicated here is in designing grammatical chains in which discrete grammatical items are linked, is that the links can be rather tenuous. The links are shaky. The links are shaky in a sense that, again, when grammatical material is graded, right? So it is not discrete, right? It is not the case that today I'm going to teach you present tense, right? And tomorrow I'm going to teach you another tense. But in communication, the language does not function in discrete structures. Language functions as a whole. Okay, we do not use one discrete item in conversation at one time and no other, right? um, so research in SLA, second language acquisition, also reflects that learning does not take place in an additive fashion. That is, learning does not take place item by item, structure by structure. Okay, learning takes place as a whole, and this is the prime reason why we have seen a movement from grammar translation to communicative approach. Okay, CLT. That's the main reason, because there is no discrete teaching of grammar, of structures, of items of the language. Okay. Now, what can be the solutions? One solution would be just to not grade the language, just not to divide the language into items, into structures, into simpler structures and difficult structures, short structures to long structures, simple to complicated. There is no need to grade. So learners should be exposed to the total language. Okay. So in other words, learner would be exposed to the naturalistic samples of text. Okay, not the artificial ones, naturalistic samples, the actual use of the language. Okay, we need to provide them richer content, right? Items should not be learned in isolation, should not be graded, right? And they should be what should be graded. If we have to select the content and if we have to grade it, task can be graded, okay, not the discrete language items. Yeah. Okay, discrete items, as we studied in grammar translation method, right? You are, one day, I tell you that we are going to focus on tenses. And I tell you that there are 8 different kind of tenses. That is what I am telling you, that tenses can be divided into 8 kinds. Okay, that is, I have taken one aspect of the language, which is tenses, and then I divide them further into 8 kinds. Okay, I tell you that there are 3 kinds, and then there are sub kinds, and the total kinds of tenses are 8. So what I have done, I'm trying to separate, isolate items of the language. Okay, but the major criticism, dilemma means the problem. Okay, Nagma, dilemma means the problem. Yes, right. So today I'm going to tell you about present tense and the rules related to the present tense. Okay, tomorrow I add another thing. This is called as editing or additive. Okay, so it says that the language learning does not go in additive fashion, that you keep on adding one aspect, and then when my students are fluent in present simple present tense, then I move on to present continuous tense. So what I added another kind of a tense to it, okay, to the language learning. This is called as learning of language items or structures in isolation. Okay, so another day I start my class and I tell you that today I'm going to teach you direct and indirect. And then I separate. Today, see, there are 2 kinds of speeches. One is direct speech and the other is indirect speech. Today we are going to do direct speech. We are not going to touch the indirect one. What I have done is I separated one aspect of the language for teaching today. And tomorrow once my class is fluent, has learned all the rules of direct speech, is able to apply those rules as well. We have practiced it through exercises. Now I'll add indirect speech to it. Okay. So I am teaching discrete units, right? I'm not teaching language as a whole. Okay. Now, I hope I have answered these questions. Okay, Kanis, I'm going to give you naturalistic samples also. Darkhani, have I answered your question? Discrete items, that means teaching of language in isolation, not within context, taking one item, one structure at a time. Okay, I hope that is clear. Right. Okay. Now, someone is asking me for the naturalistic sample. Now, naturalistic sample means language as it occurs or as it is spoken, language as it is used in communication. Exposing your children, your students to naturalistic samples means I show you a video in English. Okay, now what is happening in this video? Communication is going on. Maybe 2 people are speaking in English. Okay, and this is happening within a context, within a situation, not in isolation. They are not producing dialogues in isolation. There is some situation in the movie and they are producing the language accordingly, right? So these are some of the naturalistic samples. Okay. We can if we if we want to give an exposure of our student to the actual use of language, we can give them these newspaper news from the newspapers to read. We can give them magazines to read. Okay, that's the actual language. Okay, language not in isolation, in separate sentences, like taught through grammatical syllabuses. Okay, because when I give my students an exercise where there are 10 sentences and I ask them to change them from direct to indirect, those sentences do not stand anywhere. Those, they stand in isolation, they are without context, there is no context to them. Okay, the quote, for instance, if I give you an example of direct speech and I tell you to change it into indirect speech, and I give you an example, you know, the quote ordered. Okay, and then the direct speech begins with quotation marks. Open the university for the final semesters. Okay, the court ordered, or the court orders, or the court said, and then quotation marks, open the university for the final semester, right? Quotation marks closed, right? So I have chosen this sentence in isolation, and I am using it to teach direct and indirect speech. Okay, so this is what is meant by providing students naturalistic samples. Naturalistic sample means language as actually used. Okay. Can we say teaching through realia is also naturalistic? As far as realia is concerned, of course, we have seen realia in direct method also, and in other methods also. Yes, it is, right, to a certain extent. For instance, you have we saw that a map is being taught. The map of the United States is being taught, and the teacher brings in the map, right? So the paragraphs, actually, if something is taught through the paragraph instead of sentences, so that means a certain kind of context is already built, right? To a certain extent, of course, if you bring in realia can be in any form. Realia can be in the form of movie also. Realia can be in the form of anything that is tangible as well. So basically, teaching of language in context is the naturalistic kind of a language, where you give an exposure to your students to the actual use of language. Okay, if the language is being learned in the native situation, then that really becomes easy for you, because a native environment gives them the natural use of the language. Okay, I hope anyone who asked for the naturalistic approach, I've answered that. Okay, naturalistic exposure to the language, right? Okay, so what needs to be graded? If we say that, okay, now it is clear. Now, if we say that grading of structures, of forms, or grammatical items is not fruitful, okay, so what kind of a syllabus should it be? Because we define syllabus as selection and grading of items, right? So when we say that, the problem lies with grading of grammatical items, so what should be graded? So this is suggested that, yes, Durhani, you're right. What you are saying, you're right. It is easier to give them exposure to the actual use of the language in native environments. Okay, so what can be used alternatively is to grade the tasks. Okay. So grading the task is better than grading the grammatical items, structures, or forms, right? Now, what do you mean by grading the task? Okay. For instance, greeting, you design a task for teaching them greeting. Greeting is a part of actual communication. So this is one task. You can grade it that you will begin with the task of greeting. Okay. Then you design a task how to communicate with a shopkeeper. Okay. So that's another task. You can grade it, you can bring it after the greeting. They should know how to, how to communicate or how to go about their daily tasks in the language that they are learning, so that they become functional in the language, so that they become communicative in the language. Okay. And alternatively, we will also look at functional notional syllabus in a while. Okay. So if you do not agree to, grammatical syllabus, and we think that following the syllabus would not make our student communicative in the language, or the language would not be of much use to them, even if they learn all the rules. And this is what we have seen in our actual experience also, and this is what we have read in the books as well, right? And that happened to be one of the reasons of failure of grammar translation method as well. Okay. Right. Now let's move to task 26, what you are supposed to do. At this stage, you might like to consider the different suggestions above and rank them from most to least satisfactory, all these assumptions. Okay, can you think of any other ways of addressing the problem of controlling input while at the same time using naturalistic language? Controlling input, what you're going to teach your students, what you're going to give to your students as a part of teaching of English as a second language, and so that they are learning the language to function in the society. Okay. Or they are able to use the language. So can you think of any other ways of addressing the problem of controlling input, what you're teaching your students, while at the same time using naturalistic language? So how can you teach naturalistic language through designing a syllabus, right? Okay, so you have to think of ways. How can you control the input? Okay, what are you going to select? How are you going to grade, right? So one thing is, if you do not want to grade grammatical item, you can grade the tasks. Okay, right. Criticizing grammatical syllabuses, we have done a lot of criticism. Task 25, Kanis, do you want me to go back here? Okay, now this syllabus is given to you by McDonough, right? And he has actually designed the syllabus from simple to complex. Okay, she starts with, Kapila. Did you check? What is Kapila? What I was telling you was right. Okay, stay with that. This is a linking word, and usually it comes as a helping verb and acts as a main verb when the main verb is missing. For instance, there is no main verb. She's happy, so this happens to be a copula. Okay. So the lessons that he has planned, McDonough has planned, these are just the names. Through alphabets he identifies it. Okay, L is the simplest one, then moving to increasing the complexity, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, right? So finally in S he introduces the adverbs of habits also. So there are adverbs, and then there are kinds of adverbs, and so he introduces this, right? So basically he's moving from simple to complex. Okay. Now, whenever a syllabus is designed, there are some certain assumptions behind it. Assumptions about the language and assumptions about language learning. So what assumption do you see here? Okay. Basically, it's a grammatical syllabus. Okay. So the the immediate assumption that you see is that designer McDonough believes that students would learn simpler structure easily and the complex structure with some difficulty. That is why he has ordered his syllabus from simple to complex. Uh, why do we say that there are assumptions to language learning? Because these are not true. And we have discussed that simpler structures are not necessarily easy and complex structures are not necessarily difficult, right? So this is the assumption. Assumption means, how do you translate assumption? Assumption is, not necessarily something, not necessarily true. You think it so, okay? But it is not compulsory that, it would be true all the time. Yes, yes, this is one of the suggestions, right? Because tasks take the language as a whole, right? So when you grade the task, of course, you have to grade it because in a syllabus is defined as selecting and grading of contents. So of course, you have to grade the content. Some things or few things from the syllabus should be taught before the other things are taught, of course. That is why grading of content or grading of items or whatever you call the being the part of the syllabus is, you need to grade it in a way that what should be taught first and what should be taught after, then what should be taught finally. Okay. And all your grading and all your selection should move around the objectives. Okay. So this is what you have to do is, what assumptions about language and language learning do you imagine might underpin a grammatical syllabus of the type described above? So I've told you one of the assumptions of, language learning. The assumption is that, simple structures are easy to learn, so simple structures should be taught first. This is one of the assumptions which happens to be incorrect. So this is what you are going to look for. Assumptions about the language, that um, grammatical structures can be graded. This is assumption about the language. Okay, one of the assumptions about the language is that elements can be graded. Assumption about language learning is simpler structures can be learned quickly or easily by the learners. Okay, I hope Kanis, this exercise is clearer to you. Exercise 25. Okay, you can study for answering these tasks. You can study from other sources also. Okay, from the methods also that we have done, you are going to get a lot of answers from there as well. Okay. At this stage, you might like to consider different suggestions above and rank them from most to least satisfactory. Okay, there are some suggestions how you can make a good syllabus better than the grammatical ones. Before we move to criticizing grammatical syllabuses, can you think of any other ways of addressing the problem of controlling the input while at the same time using naturalistic language? Basically, the task is asking you to move from grammatical syllabuses to, something of a functional kind. How can you make the syllabus a very practical one that can enable the students to actually use the language? Okay, so what kind of input means what kind of content would be there that you're going to teach in your classrooms? Okay, so that you can also use, naturalistic language. Okay. Almost at the same time when, these grammar things were being criticized. So uh, the use of structured syllabus came under increasing criticism. One of them is, grammatical syllabus. We are going to look at the criticism about these. Okay. Now, one early criticism was that structurally graded syllabuses misrepresented the nature of that complex phenomena, language. Okay. Language is one whole. Okay. It cannot be taught separately. So this is the same thing. Structurally graded syllabus, grammatical syllabuses are structurally graded syllabuses. Okay. Okay, I think I've got disconnected. Let me reshare the slide. Okay. Many girls got disconnected along, right? So when we say that, language is a complex phenomenon, it is not simple as to grade elements and items in a language. The complexity lies when there is no one-to-one relationship between the form and function of the language. For instance, um, many structurally graded coursework begin with the structure demonstrative plus B plus NP. This is a book. Now, how many different communicative purposes can you think of for this statement, right? See, this is a form that you teach your students. Okay. Now, this form is not used for one purpose. So there is no direct relationship between the form and the function. This is a book, this can be piece of information. This is a book. Okay. Maybe you're ordering someone, can't you see the book? Take this book. Or you are being sarcastic. This is the book, right? If someone is, unable to find the book, you are saying this is the book. You are using it sarcastically. Okay. You are ordering someone. This is the book. That means start reading the book, right? So there can be so many purposes. This can be, a surprise can be another function. This is the book. Okay. So the form remains one, but this sentence can be used in a number of ways. If this sentence is being spoken, intonation pattern would change the functions, right? So it can be, it can express surprise, it can express sarcasm, it can only be a piece of information, it can be, ordering someone, or it can be advising someone that this is the book, start reading. So one structure or one form of a language functions in different way according to the context. according to the situation. This is another reason that language elements, items, or contents cannot be graded and taught in isolation, because this goes along. Language should be taught as a whole because one form performs many functions. So you have to tell your students what are the functions, and you can only add functions to the form when you are teaching language in context and not in isolation. Okay. So this is complicated because language fulfills a variety of communicative functions and there is no one-to-one relationship between forms and functions. Other than that, one function can be done through using different forms. For instance, request, may I have a drink please, can I have a drink please, trusty weather this, looks like an interesting wine, I'm dying for a drink, is that a bottle of champagne, all of these. Okay, so what is it? Someone needs a drink, right? Function is one, request, and it is being said in different forms. Okay, here form is one, the cliff are over there, and this is performing a variety of functions. Okay, it can be the cliff are over there, this can be direction, this can be warning, this can be suggestion. Okay, so your task 28 is, can you think of example of single structure fulfilling several functions? Okay, as the example is here and as the example is here. Being fulfilled by several structures. Can you think of example of single structure fulfilling several functions and single function being fulfilled by several structures? Okay. NP is a noun trace. Okay, probably you are here. Okay, demonstrative are articles, the, a. Be is, it can be copula or a verb. Here it is. An NP is a noun phrase. Noun phrase consists of a demonstrative and a noun, a book. The whole is a noun phrase. Okay. I thought that you have done pedagogical grammar. That is why I did not explain these. Have you done pedagogical grammar? Have you done pedagogical grammar? Let me check. What are you saying? Okay, you have done that. Right. Okay, fine. Now, I think should we continue? Should we continue tomorrow? Okay, guys, we'll have a class at 9 in the morning. Okay, it's Maghrib time as well. We have to go for prayers. We'll continue, okay, and we'll complete this chapter definitely by tomorrow. We'll have a class from 9 to 10, and after the completion of this chapter, of course, by Monday you would be on campus. For your other courses, perhaps, but I would start with the last chapter for everyone, and then we will go back to the initial lectures for people who miss these online classes. Okay.